you?
Doing all right. Well, we are about at noon, so we're going to get started. First of all, I want to welcome all of you to our event. My name is Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director of the Teaching and Learning Center. I'm glad for all of you can be here in real time. I'm also glad to see all of you who are watching this asynchronously later. You're in our thoughts today. We have a professional development series that meets every Wednesday at noon. You know this because you're here. We look forward to offering you many other great events. We have a great event today. Our event for next week is going to be Dr. Cody Wallace from Counseling Services talking to us about mental well-being and the whole student. When we were chit-chatting a little bit before this event, we understand the need for events like this because our students, as one of us said, are on the struggle bus, and we got to learn to do what we can for them and for ourselves the rest of the way through this semester and forevermore. So please come and see that event. But today's event is amazing. I'm very excited to have Greg Eislein, Kiley, Moody, and Rebeca Paz here to talk to us about engaging and supporting first-generation students through the new not normal. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our wonderful presenters today.
Thank you.
So I'll just start. My name's Greg Eislein. I'm the director of K-State First and a professor in the Department of English. I myself am a first-generation student, and I'm excited to be here today.
Good afternoon. I'm Kiley Moody, and I serve as Managing Director of Scholar Services in the Academic Achievement Center. I am also a first-generation college graduate, and I teach the first-generation CAT community.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rebeca Paz, and I serve as Assistant Director for the Office of First Generation Students. And I was a first generation student while in college. So I'm very excited to be here with my colleagues to have this engaging conversation today. And Don Saucier is also first gen. Thank you. And I'm wondering how many of you are. So before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge our land as the first land grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act. We acknowledge that the state of Kansas is historically home to many Native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home for our federally recognized Native nations, the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, and Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska. As you may know, this is National First Generation Student Week, so this workshop aligns very well with our celebrations, and we would also like to take the opportunity to invite you to attend a couple of more celebrations that we have. This afternoon, 4 p.m. Forum Hall, we will be inducting our 110 students into our inaugural Honor Society, which is Tri Alpha. It's the first one. We're really excited. So if you have some time, please come and honor our students. We're going to have some students via Zoom and some students in person. And again, 4 p.m. Forum Hall. Tomorrow, if you have time to stop by the Union, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. We're going to be celebrating. We're going to have fun activities. We're going to have a tie-dye mask activity. We're going to have another station where you can take pictures. We're going to have also a station to pick up T-shirts, proud to be first T-shirts. And at noon, we're going to have an awards reception because we were able to fundraise $4,000 to give scholarships to students. So it's going to be a very exciting day, and mostly we're there to celebrate our first gen community. So whether you're first gen or not, please join us and tell your students about it.
Thank you, Rebecca. So now we'd like to do some just quick introductions. And so we thought we might use a waterfall to do that. And so in the chat, what I'd like you to do is type the information that I'm about to ask for. And then when I say hit send, we'll hit send and we'll all share our stuff at once. But if you want to put your name and what your unit or home department is, title if you want, if that makes sense. Feel free to add your pronouns if you want. And also, if you want, you don't have to, but if you're a first-gen student and want to add, if you were a first-generation college student or are a first-generation college student, feel free to add that as well. And I'm going to give you about, I don't know, 10, 15 more seconds. And when I say, we're going to see everybody's going to introduce themselves at once. Okay, are you ready? Hit send. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're hoping this will be useful a little bit later. We just wanted to start with we struggled with, like, what do we even call this moment, right? If you call it post-pandemic because we're back and we're all together, that's not quite true, right? The pandemic's not quite over. And maybe even saying quite indicates more optimism than maybe I should have. Some people are back, but we all know that the experience of the pandemic changed some things forever. When we went to the lockdown and lots of remote online lockdown learning and use of tech, some people never quite came back from that, at least not entirely and fully. The university did tell us, like, hey, if you taught in person before, we want you to teach in person again. But along the way, our students and ourselves learned all kinds of things to do online, for instance, TLC events, that we're probably going to be doing a lot of this Zoom learning for a while. This is a moment where a lot of us wish it were normal, right? But it's not. Not everybody's vaccinated yet. Good news, right? That this month with the 5 to 11-year-olds are eligible for getting vaccinated. Maybe this will be a moment, but there are still some people who can't be vaccinated, still some people who won't be vaccinated. We're still wearing face masks. A lot of us wish it was post-pandemic, but it's not quite. But it's not quite like it was in 2020 either. So we're wondering, what do we call this moment? Whatever, and we don't have the right name. We're calling it the new not normal. A lot of people called this the new normal because we knew things would change, but we'll pretend it's back to normal. But it's not normal. My students are struggling a lot. And that's what we wanted to start with. If you have the right word for describing what this moment is, please put it in the chat, because we're interested to know. But we're going to call it the new not normal for the purposes of today's workshop. But we wanted to start with a poll, and Noah's going to put the first of those questions out there. The first question is, how well do you think your first-gen college students are handling college this year? This semester, compared to their continuing generation peers. There's just one choice there, and you could say, I don't know, but if you think they're doing much better, or they're about the same, or you think they're struggling, please answer. The second question that I want you to think about is, how well do you think your students, all of them, are doing compared to students from 2019, our last fall 2019, our last pre-COVID year. We have a mischievous question here, the last one, which is, how many of you are multitasking today, or at least thinking about multitasking today's workshop? And if you're multitasking right now, click that. If you're going to be honest and say, oh, I'll probably multitask at some point, click that. And if you're like, no, I don't multitask at Zoom learning meetings, I need to be present in, yeah, lunch counts, Melissa, lunch counts. And oh, by the way, we mean this in kindness, and we're not trying to, our point isn't to embarrass or humiliate anybody in any way whatsoever, but we're curious, like, when you go to something like this, do you multitask or think about it? Let us know. And I'm going to give you 10 more seconds. submit your answers, and in about 5 or 10 more seconds, Noah's gonna, or no, let's give a little bit more time. Noah, when it looks like most of the answers are in, do you want to share those results with us?
Yes, absolutely. It looks about, we have about 5 more people waiting to respond, and then I'll
Okay.
share them.
Yeah, take your time, no rush. We are curious what you think, because we don't know. We don't know if first-gen students are struggling more this semester than continuing generation students, but we'd be interested to know. This is a lunchtime event, and I think it is about the design is a brown bag, right, which is an inherently multitasking kind of event. But
Looks like we're kind of stopping around 85% of people voting. Do you want me to go ahead and share the results? You got it.
Okay, so with the first question, it looks to me like about almost 90% of you think that first-gen students are struggling more than, or much more than their first-generation peers. Why do you think that is? I would agree. I think I have some students that are doing fine. You wouldn't know that there had been a pandemic or a lockdown, or that there have been I teach a lot of first-year students, but that there have been a loss of learning during their last year and a half of high school. But why do you think that is? Why do you think first-gen students are struggling more? Feel free to unmute and just blurt out your answer, or put it in the chat. Melissa says that that's her experience.
I'm finding that during the slightly reduced COVID times, I guess is what I'm going to call it, during the slightly reduced COVID times, a lot of the resources that some of the incoming first-gen students would have had, like campus tours and things like that, didn't happen. So I'm having to, and I'm happy to, but they're asking more questions about where they can find things. They're asking more questions about what resources exist. So I just have to kind of guide them a little more than I used to.
Yep. Destiny makes it. Thank you, Tiffany. I think that's right. Destiny makes a great point that, college is rough for a lot of students, but if there was some learning loss and you don't have a family that kind of knows the ins and outs of college, it can be hard to have someone show you like how to adapt to college, how to make the most of it. Especially if you're on your own and feeling like when you don't know something that it must be your fault. Is it Alyssa Karkle or Elisa? Feels like they're less connected to university resources, not reaching out. They're struggling with the paper, but they don't go to the writing center to get some tutoring help. They don't get help on their Math 100 problems at the tutoring center. Well, Melissa, are you also, just to go on to the next question, because I think Melissa starts to allude to it, you all seem to think about, it looks like as 3/4 of you, that students in general are struggling more this year than pre-COVID. There's been some evidence and some reporting of the learning loss that happened during lockdown and during the kind of weird remote year that was last year. And it was uneven, right? Like schools handled the pandemic differently, but they don't seem to have thrived as students as much last year as they had in previous years. But also higher anxiety and lower social skills. Yep. Is anyone else experiencing or seeing what, Melissa? Homesickness? the lockdown remote learning wasn't always fun, but it was often easy, right? Roll out of bed, turn it on, black your screen, and it's like you're in class, but not really. Yeah, Brene, green with Morgan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if exams need to be in person or not, but I do know that some students have difficulty figuring out how to make the most of online learning. That it often doesn't seem as interesting and engaging to them, and so they disengage intentionally, unintentionally, and there's less learning. There could be other reasons. High anxiety. Yeah. Let's go to the third one. So thank you all for being honest here. Only about 11% of you aren't going to be multitasking at some point. And I think we know this happens, right? You know, even awesome TLC workshops where there's a lot to learn. We're trying to get extra stuff done, and it's easier. We don't have to be fully present, and that's fine, right? But there's sometimes for, especially our first gen students who are struggling, where being fully present could help a lot. And if they're, as one of my colleagues put this, if we're multitasking, what do we think our students are doing? And we're probably fooling ourselves if we think they aren't multitasking or that they are fully present and fully engaged in our classes all the time. Our point is simple. You know, the new not normal has presented us with a less than ideal learning environment. And a lot of people are negotiating that just fine, but there seems to be some evidence that first gen students, and maybe lots of our students, are not negotiating it just fine. I'm going to turn it over to Kiley.
Actually, Rebecca.
Okay, thank you, everyone. This was a great introduction, and kind of like you pretty much spoke about the stuff that I'm going to cover about the challenges, right? Because we understand, and I think there's consensus that from 90% of you that you feel that the first generation students are just less engaged and they're struggling. And I think that's something to really pay attention to. And also, and we understand that this year has impacted our students and all of us, right? And for me, I try to connect to my own experience so I can connect to the student experience, right? Like Greg just so eloquently spoke about multitasking. If I'm multitasking, if I'm not fully present, if the student is not, what are the things that I need to do so that they are present, because that's getting in the way. So let's talk a little bit about how is this different than a year ago? Because a year ago it was right into COVID, and right now we are kind of one foot inside COVID, the other foot outside COVID, you know, this new normal or whatever we want to call it, right? And so let's talk a little bit about the classroom. Is your classroom right now, there seems to be a mix of learning modes and perhaps a mix of teaching modes, right? We're all still adjusting. And for example, high flex is a new term that I learned from Dr. Eislein, which means that the class is in person, but some students choose to go online. And this may be happening with a lot of first generation students. And so, and traditionally, academically underprepared and first generation students historically struggle with online learning. So if they're still navigating hybrid or high flex modalities, they could still be facing a barrier right there. However, let's not forget that other students seem to do well with online learning, or they may prefer this modality. So let's not ignore that piece. So it's not just one size fits all. For example, non-traditional students may prefer online learning. And so, and that's also true for a lot of non-traditional students that are first generation. It's easier for them because they can be home with the kids, they've adjusted and they love it. So as instructors and professors, we have to also adjust to all of our learners, right? So if high flex is happening in your classrooms right now, it may not be the best for every student, especially first generation traditional students. So we ask you to think about your classroom and what's happening. Is it high flex? Is it in person? And try to accommodate to their needs. So let's talk more about the new normal and whatever you want to call it, right? And I think this piece was already touched on through the chat. Some students feel that the system thinks that we're back to normal, right? So because we're back in our offices 8 to 5, the students are thinking, oh my gosh, we're back to normal, right? We're supposed to be back as of 2 years ago, but the reality is it's not normal or whatever. It's not pre-COVID. So my colleagues that I've talked to across K-State, they tell me that their students feel that they cannot bring up the challenges to justify their issues because we think we're back to normal. Okay, so that's how they're feeling, and it's creating anxiety. Okay, so this could, we're going to ask you to think about when your students bring up issues that this could be happening to them, that they may not be feeling comfortable because they may think, oh, my professor is not going to understand because we're back to normal. So they're feeling less connected to folks than before COVID, and they're trying to figure out how to find community in this new environment. And I think this was brought up in the chat too. They don't know how to do it. It's different. They're disengaged and they're learning less just because of these struggles. And so, what is the social and academic impact? This all has effects on that learning. So one of the realizations that we ask, is that we're still in a transition period, right? I think we figured it out. It's not pre-COVID and it's not post-COVID. We're still in this new normal or whatever normal we want to call it. And we realize that the pandemic is not over. So this means that students are still adjusting, like we are still adjusting, right? We're still exhausted. We're trying to figure it out. They're in the same boat. And it takes a lot of bandwidth and emotional energy. And I am so glad that Dr. Cody Walls is going to have a whole session on this because I feel this mental health is really taking a toll on all of our students. And so you may also notice at this point in the semester that the students are exhausted. And I think usually at this point in the semester before the fall break, they're exhausted, right? But I think this exhaustion started maybe a month ago. So take that into consideration as you teach your classes. We also have learned that financial challenges still exist and they can compound as stressors. The mental health issues have surfaced for all students. And this is, we've been getting a lot of national awareness and coverage. According to the PBS series, Rethinking Higher Education, I don't know how many of you have been watching, but it's fascinating. They have reported that over the past year, we have watched stress, anxiety, and depression go about fourfold for everyone, 4 times more. So that's huge. And I think we need to pay attention. It's happening across the nation, but it's also happening in our campus. Another thing that has also been affecting the students is social media is contributing to their anxiety because more than now they're checking each other's Instagram stories, how many likes do I have? And that's also adding. So like Dr. Eislein pointed out before, for our first generation students, their families may not be prepared to help them through this period, right? Right now, we're trying to make sense of it. But their first generation families may have other issues to think about, they don't quite understand. So it's gonna be a little harder for our first gen students. And our students are also grappling with the big question, how do I find community in this new normal? So you see, it's all layered. There's a lot of stuff going on and it's not settled. Could we go to the next slide, please, Kiley? And then of course, we wanna talk about the COVID challenges, right? This is the elephant in the room. And so the COVID related situations are still emerging. Some people have the vaccine, some people don't want to get the vaccine, right? So for example, students may get still sick from COVID and they may miss class, they be less prepared, it's gonna affect them. And they may need accommodations and support. So if they think that we think everything is back to normal, they're not gonna reach out to us. So for us to really be mindful to let them know, right, where we are, and then they can seek support. Another situation is that immunocompromised students may be reluctant to attend class in person. And that may be the reason why they're choosing the HyFlex. They may not be telling us, right? They may just be showing up and you could see their blank screen, but there may be all these reasons why they're choosing to do that. And another realization I think we're coming through this pandemic is that we do live in the digital age. And I would have said, yeah, we knew that 2 years ago, but I think now it's really settling in, and it's settling fast, because whether we're tech savvy or not, technology is really going to be a major tool used in learning, and we're all going to have to figure out ways to engage those students in the classroom, whether it's hybrid or flex or however, and use technology. And so also realizing that online learning is going to depend not only on the student, but also on the teacher. So we're all going to have to adjust. So that's all I have for now, and I'm going to let Kiley take from here.
Thank you, Rebecca. So as we were brainstorming ideas and different maybe things to try out that we have found beneficial and heard from others, these were just kind of some ideas that came to mind. And so now more than ever, making sure that we are providing clear expectations. And so students know exactly what they need, what is required of them for them to complete the assignment. We are also modeling clear and concise communication. And so I am teaching an asynchronous class for the first time ever, and I will be completely transparent. I do not love it for a number of reasons, but in that class, I have communicated via video. I've also put up announcements, and I have also sent out emails trying to make sure that students understand what week to week looks like, what is expected of them, and that depending on how they like to receive information, that is how I am communicating it to them. Also, really thinking about just-in-time resources. And so, as Rebecca mentioned, we all know that this time of the semester is stressful, pre-COVID and pre-everything going on. And so having real conversations with students and helping normalize some of those feelings. So I have done some different check-ins using sticky notes, having students write down a word or a couple of words to describe how they are currently feeling. And then I collect those and then I share them out so that when 5 people are saying exhausted and others are saying tired, that we can help them see that they're not alone, and then helping them know what resources are available. So CAPS, Counseling and Psychological Services, has done a terrific job this year of implementing work groups and different ways of students being able to engage and connect. And so letting students know about those and be aware. Also, knowing and giving yourself permission to maybe even take a timeout. This week has been out of control for me. I could see in my students' faces that they were just exhausted and shutting down. So I canceled class this morning. I told them, go to the library, use this time to work on other classes, like we're going to regroup. And so really being mindful of that, but then at the same time, helping to hold the students accountable. I work with a lot of students, and it seems like this year turning in assignments has been a challenge. And so I have really been kind of pushing them a little bit and asking and, using that what if grades to kind of check in and see where they are now and what do they need to do these next few weeks to get the best grade that they can. And so again, providing rubrics, providing good feedback too, so that students know what is expected of them and how they can make progress on those next assignments. And then knowing that we all are probably using Zoom still in different ways. And so how are we using Zoom and what does engagement on Zoom look like to really try to make sure that students are still connected and are still able to participate? And so is that using breakout rooms on Zoom if you have a couple of students joining that way? Is it asking them questions and having them respond to them? But what does that look like too to make sure that those students are still involved and feel part of the community? Which is a good segue into the next slide, which is that community building. I tried something new this year where the first class period in one of my classes, I had different questions. And so I broke them up into groups and we spent the whole class period going around and responding to those prompts. And so it was like, what adjectives would you use to describe yourself? What hobbies? What brings you joy? What problems or challenges are you interested in solving? And in that particular class, my students are really close. And I wish I would have done that in a couple of the other classes that I have been working with, because their connection and their sense of belonging is fairly strong. And they even comment when, again, I have all first generation students. And when they were asking what class will look like in the spring, and I shared with them that unfortunately we wouldn't meet as a class. A lot of them were disappointed, but I told them that doesn't mean that you all can't still get together and meet together. We also often talk about that what is good for our first generation students is good for all students. And so continuing to keep that in mind, that when we have clear expectations, when we provide rubrics, when we have clear communication, that's not only beneficial for our first generation students, but for all students, and really kind of looks at that lens through equity. Also doing mid-semester check-in or feedback. And so using a quick Qualtrics survey or a Google form that again allows you to take in some anonymous feedback. I like to use sticky notes a lot too, sometimes just to mix it up. But that is an opportunity to kind of really take the temperature and know how our students doing. What are some things that maybe need to be changed or mixed up a little bit? Do they like in-class discussions, or do they prefer more lecture or videos? But a lot of times that can be helpful too. And then finally, which I have seen great examples of this, but for some of those larger group projects or larger writing assignments or research papers or other things, really breaking that down for students. And so helping them know and kind of give them a timeline of what could be due when. We've talked a lot about time management, but again, I hear from continuing generation and upper class students and first generation students that time management has seemed to be a really big challenge this year. Going back to, I think Greg and Rebecca both spoke to this, that when you can, kind of wake up 10 minutes before you have to be on your Zoom call and you're good to go, versus having to get up, maybe eat breakfast, and then maybe drive to campus, and then find parking, and then walk to the building. That time management piece looks a lot different. I'm sure you all probably too can relate to, you go from a Zoom meeting to an in-person meeting or vice versa, but then you're late because you haven't built in travel time and all the things. So being mindful of that too, and how can we break things down for our students. So I'm going to turn it back over to Greg now, and we're going to do a couple of other ways to kind of engage with you all and get some of your feedback. Greg, you're on mute.
Of course I was on mute. Thank you. That ends the kind of part of this workshop where we talk at you. What we'd like to do is, Kiley, are you the one that has a Padlet link? There it is. We have a Padlet where we have some questions for you. What we're interested is in, like, how have your teaching experiences been this semester? What's it been like for you teaching first gen students and all of your students so far this semester? We're interested in what has been working, what has not been working, and what are you struggling with, especially in your interaction with first generation students. And I'm gonna give you a few minutes to start recording some answers on the Padlet that Kiley put in. You're welcome to put your answers in the chat as well. But yeah, let's just take a few minutes and think and share some ideas. And we're going to use this as the basis for our discussion on our way out of the second half of this workshop today. So continue to put your ideas into the Padlet. I'm not trying to cut that short, but I thought we might just start discussing some of these ideas about like this semester is unique, right? It's not the same as 2020, 2021, when there was lots of online learning. It's certainly not the same as it was 2019 and before, and it's certainly not, does not feel 20th century to me. So what's it been like this semester? Who would like to share some of their things they've been noticing, or some of the experiences they described in the Padlet, or just thought about? What's this semester been like? Carrie, I noticed earlier on, you mentioned reports of students, quote, acting out, engaging in some kind of negative behaviors that, they're, that it's the kind of psychological defense mechanism in a way, but it's also not in their best interest. What are some of the things that you meant to allude to there?
Well, I actually can't, the specific examples were not shared in the meeting I was in, but what I guess was notable was that they weren't typical behavioral issues, that always come up. They seem to be like above the typical acting out. And I don't know if it was dangerous or,
okay.
I'm not really sure, but I just know that has been reported in a number of meetings that I have been in with student life and housing and dining.
Yeah, I was just putting that together with what you said thank you, Carrie, with what you said in the Padlet, because one of the things I've noticed is that students under pressure, getting behind, not quite doing what they need to be doing. And at that moment, it's felt maybe in the past, not to idealize the past, but that a lot of students start to get it. Like, okay, I need to step it up. College is a little bit harder than high school. I need to perform. But instead, they retreat and they just disappear, right? They show up on Zoom all the time with a black screen. They don't hand in work. They don't come to class. And I just worry like, oh, that's the wrong direction to be going. And you can reach out and reach out and reach out, and it doesn't seem to make a difference. It's one of the things that's really concerned about. And it's not all our students by any means, but what are some other things you're seeing?
Greg, I had put in the Padlet that at the beginning of the semester, my students were supercharged, super engaged. It's like they were yearning, craving the kind of in-person contact. Now, early November, that's waning a bit. It appears kind of that that supercharge has kind of burned itself out just a little bit, and they're still more engaged than I might have expected them to be at this point in the semester. But there's been kind of a sharp contrast to what I'm seeing now versus what I saw a little bit earlier.
Yep. Thank you, Don. I would agree. That's my perception as well. And I think it rhymes with what Taylor has said in the chat, right? That there is, and there definitely was, a sense of relief, like we're back and you could see people. And introvert or extrovert, right? You could have this in-person contact that felt good and energizing. But yeah, there's so many challenges these days, right? That and I think I had underestimated the extent to which my students were seriously concerned about getting sick, or other people being sick, their family members, for instance. I, for some reason, thought that a lot of traditional age college students were the people who were least concerned about COVID, feeling invincible. But some of the studies show that it's the number one concern they have, is that friends or family are going to get sick. And that weighs on them. There's some great stuff in the Padlet. Would anybody like to share what they put in there? Yeah. Yep. At the start of this, thank you, Destiny. At the start of the semester, I had everybody in class, and then, slowly but surely, more and more people are using the high flex option, which I feel like a lot of us feel like obligated to have in case somebody's sick or has COVID, or they are that non-traditional student, like I can't make it to campus today, but I don't want to miss out on learning. But we don't know if that's always the folks that are taking advantage of it. Sometimes it's people who want credit for being in class but don't want to be put on the spot.
Morgan brought up a good point in the chat that students are so overwhelmed by classes that they can't comprehend adding other things. And I have heard that from a lot of student leaders of organizations who have said it has been really hard to get students involved and engaged this year. And even I know that I feel like now more than ever, we have more on-campus jobs available. And so I think that speaks to that a little bit too, that they are trying to think about how to juggle multiple responsibilities again.
Thank you, Kiley. And thank you, Morgan. In the Padlet, a lot of you are sharing some things that have not been working this year, and pretending that everyone is okay. That's not working for me either. But student anxiety about grades, anxiety in general. What are some of the things you're seeing that aren't working this year? One person says engaging students on Zoom. They often turn to Zoom so they don't have to engage. And I tried, just to share a little bit, when I started seeing more and more students, I started planning 2 classes, right? One for the people in class, one for the people on Zoom. And my Zoom lesson plans were all about getting them to engage. And I don't know that they were really happy with that, right? I think it was better learning. I was asking them to contribute constantly, but it was hard for me. I felt scattered, like trying to do 2 things at once. And I don't think they were happy with me that I was making them do things. I think they wanted to watch the class or pretend to watch the class, or maybe that's harsh. But what else are you seeing that doesn't work? Thank you, Melissa. We really do want to go through this kind of valley before we go back up to the mountaintop of some things we can do.
So one of the things that I put in the Padlet, Greg, was I can't imply or suggest things to my students and have them hear me. It's almost like there's so many things competing for their time and their attention. I have to be direct and repetitive. If there's something that I think is going to help them learn or help them succeed, I have to say it many times in ways that can absolutely not be misunderstood, and still realize that message is not going to be received by everybody. But it's amazing how many times, that cliche, it's in the syllabus. It's now, but I've said that 15 times in class, and students are they're just missing it. So I realize they're trying, they're dealing with a lot of stuff, but it's hard to make those connections in ways that can help them before they fail. And I think, I was having a conversation with my students this morning, we can't do the work for them. But it's kind of demoralizing when you've done everything you think you can and it doesn't work out.
Yep. Well, Dawn, can I ask, based on that, I have a question that I'd like to throw out to the group, and it goes something like this, that pre-COVID, one of the things I really loved and admired about what I saw as like superstar advisors, coaches, teachers with first-gen students is what I called stick-to-itiveness. Like they wouldn't give up on students. And so if a student didn't quite do what they needed, they would reach out, invite them to office hour, and just really not give up on students. And I do still admire seeing that quality in teachers, but I'm wondering, is that too much to ask these days? Because it puts additional pressure, not just on the students, that they don't want that. They would like somebody to give up on them. Or is it putting too much pressure on the teachers to go after them, every single one, when these teachers are exhausted themselves, as the chat has made clear? What do you think? Is stick-to-itiveness a teacherly ideal these days?
I think as long as a student is making an effort, you should stick with that student. Like if they're trying and they just can't get it, that's one thing. But if I'm emailing to someone who never responds, who doesn't show up to class, I call them ghost students sometimes because I don't see them ever, then eventually I gotta let it go. There's nothing I can do, is how I feel.
Yeah. Tiffany, thank you. That was great. I mean, what do we do about ghost students? And I don't know. I wish I knew. Like, where do you draw the line? When do you decide?
For me, it's if I don't see a student at all and I don't see any work after the first week, I send an email. I'm like, hey, do you know you're in this class? You know, and then I send another email after the second or third week, and then one more after the first exam if they didn't take the first exam. And then after that, I'm like, okay, they're not real.
Okay, thank you for going there with us to talk about, you know, some of the things that haven't been working and that have been a struggle, unique to the fall 2021. We'd like to talk now about what has been working. I agree with Dawn that, like, one of the things you can do is don't be afraid to repeat your instructions and to be super clear. It's one of the things that it seems like one of the most simple, most obvious parts about inclusive teaching or teaching for first gen students, which is to be clear about what you want them to do and when you want them to do it. And if you need to be direct and repetitive, do it. But what else has been working this year? There's some great comments in the Padlet. A lot of the comments are about being flexible. Some of them are including high flex. Does someone want to kind of talk about why flexibility or high flex has been working well for them and how it might work well for the rest of us? Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about the high flex. My comment on there was building in work time during my class time, because I've noticed they need a lot more feedback from me in real time. And with 27 of them working on 27 different lesson plans, they want individualized feedback and I just can't do it. So doing it as part of a class and then asking them to peer review and stuff, that's helped me. And I hope help them develop as educators. So it's been mutually beneficial with my own schedule, is building in that work time.
Excellent. Thank you, Gaia. I agree with Melissa too, that, you know, even though high flex is, there's nothing ideal about it, in my opinion, but it's been a lifesaver in so many ways. And it allows us to do things that, and to keep going, to keep pushing forward with our classes and with our students, when before it would have led to just either a student not being able to be there and missing out entirely. So it's been wonderful and not great all at the same time, for me, at least. Other experiences with high flex, and especially ones where things that you want to say, like, no, here's what's great about it. Yep. The student, and I guess I appreciate it because I know some of my students are sick and have COVID, right? Or I get the reports that they have COVID. So I know that's why they're taking the high flex option. And I don't want them in class, right? This is perfect for them. But for student absences in general, I mean, I think I would have had a lot more student absences had that not been an option each and every day of class.
I will say for someone who's seeing a lot of people who did not teach high flex this semester, when absences hit, they had to do a lot of things to create opportunities for those students. So doing the work ahead of time, which I am fortunate to work with wonderful TAs like Noah Rankin, doing the work ahead of time meant that when those absences hit, it didn't affect us in the way it could have. So it's one of those things where high flex is not great, but it's better than the alternative.
Well said. What else has been working well that you'd like to share? High flex, flexibility, clear instruction, structure. What are some other things that you'd like to talk about? Some of the comments in the Padlet are about kind of tapping into their excitement about being back together. In what ways does that work for some of you?
Just real quick example, I let them team teach in my freshman class, and I only had one day budgeted for it, but they were phenomenal and they had so much fun and they went longer than I anticipated. And so we just allowed it to go into a second day. And it was fun just to see their personalities come out a little bit more when they were having to teach their peers. And so that flexibility, and then yesterday made for a pretty tight schedule of what I wanted to, include in our discussions, but it worked out really well just to see some personalities and their opportunity to work together. So as one example.
So the last kind of Padlet, thank you, Gaia. The last Padlet question is about what are you still struggling with in terms of working with and interacting with first-gen students? One person talks about, I can't fix everything. There's a lot going on. I appreciated Tiffany's kind of guidance about like, yeah, you stick with it until you stop getting any response back at all, though it might easier said than done maybe. But what are some of the other things you're struggling with in your interaction with first-gen students? Compassion fatigue. Yeah. Finding that balance between holding their hand, getting them through it, supporting, pushing them. And the goal, though, isn't to do that, right? The goal is for them to be independent. And again, where's the balance there? Like Don referred to this in his comment about the hierarchy of needs. Is that what you said? Those of us who are trying to push our students to go from good to great in really nuanced intellectual ways, like that's important, I think, at college. I think that's what college is about, but they're dealing with a lot of other things that are going to get attention first. And how do we reprioritize? Okay. Other final comments about what you're still struggling with? So in our wrap up, we've got about 3 minutes left. We just wanted to get your sense of what you thought the university could do or the Office of First Gen students could do to help with some of the kind of unique challenges that we're facing here in this academic year. But also what you were thinking of doing in terms of supporting your first-gen students through the new not normal or the rest of the pandemic, or however you want to put it. So yeah, Gaya?
Yeah, I was just typing in the chat that I've got engaged with the CAT communities last year, and that was really good. It helped open my eyes a little bit more to students outside my own discipline. And so some of the resources from that program and the other PD opportunities, and then people in this group that I've met through there, helped me think about things a little bit differently. And so I think that's helped me and my work with that small group of students this last 2 years.
Yeah, finding your own support network, right? For your teaching or whatever else you need. Thank you. Is there something the university could do, or the Office of First Gen Students? It's an honest question. We're curious.
I have a comment, not necessarily what the office can do or the university can do, because, keeping in mind that we're still in this uncharted territory, I think it's, and going back to what somebody just said, having these opportunities to talk to others, I think to continue to have these conversations, because fast forward to the fall 2022, it will be different from today, right? So, and see how we can move forward, or maybe put our heads together and strategize where the students are now, what are we learning, and how we can, maybe try different strategies, because it does sound like there's a lot of agreement, right? Students are feeling stressed, there's anxiety, there's stressors, there is inequalities, but high flex works, is necessary, right? And so I think it's really important for us to talk to one another like this in forums like this to figure out what's happening, because there's no research papers written about it, because we're living in the moment.
Yeah, money. Scholarships and
Yes.
funding is one thing that they need. Yeah.
Okay, yes, I saw, I didn't see, yes, they need money, but they also need support. They need to be heard. I had a student, a non-traditional student that came last week looking for tutoring, and we had a great conversation. And today he emailed me and he said how much it helped him to just talk. And I think that piece, to have a connection, to have somebody to talk to, so you can just tell your story, I think is really, really important. And with our first generation students, their stories are so powerful. So if we take time to listen, that's also empowering them, I think. And yes.
Okay, it's 1 o'clock. So I want to say thank you to everybody. I'm going to let Kiley, Rebecca have the last word, but thank you.
I just want to say thank you. And yes, scholarships is what we need the most, because a lot of them are working many hours and trying to make ends meet, and they're working in the middle of the pandemic, and that's creating extra stressors. And thank you for coming. We appreciate you. And for all your ideas, they were amazing, because that's going to help us to make sense of where we're living right now.
So I want to thank our speakers for sharing a wonderful event with us today. I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to remind you that we have a professional development series that also rewards a certificate and also potential fellow status. Noah has dropped the post-event survey that goes with this event that we would be happy if you would complete. And as you know, we meet every noon, every Wednesday. So next week, Dr. Cody Wallace from Counseling Services will be coming to talk about mental well-being and the whole student, to hopefully continue the conversation that we've started today. But one more time, please please help me thank the presenters for sharing their thoughts about how to educate first-gen students. Great, Kiley and Rebecca, so much for taking the time with us this afternoon.